if you want to score a perfect 30 out of 30 on the TOEFL speaking section. Keep watching. In this video, we'll go through 3 full speaking tests together, so you can get a real exam experience and practice with me. You can pause the video after each question to try answering it on your own first, then continue watching to hear how I respond. Make sure to write down any new or interesting expressions and always answer each question a second time, this time using those phrases in your response. Whether you're just starting out or you've been struggling to achieve your target score, this Study With Me session will give you the practice and confidence you need for test day. Let's get started. Question 1. Independent speaking.
You will now give your opinion about a familiar topic. After you hear the question, you will have 15 seconds to prepare and 45 seconds to speak. Some people enjoy taking risks and trying new things. Others are not adventurous, they are cautious and prefer to avoid danger. Which behavior do you think is better? Explain why.
I believe people should take risks and try new things because it allows them to constantly grow and improve their lives. I remember back in college, I always said yes to all kinds of activities and events. For example, I would join different clubs and sports teams even though I had no prior experience, like playing soccer, fencing, and participating in theater productions. Nothing too risky, of course, but while I was a little nervous at first, it helped me discover new passions and improve my teamwork and communication skills. It also allowed me to build a diverse network of friends from all walks of life, many of whom I still keep in touch with today. This question is usually the hardest for most students because you should speak non-stop for 45 seconds and also think about what to say at the same time. I often see how students struggle with it during the consultations I give for our TOEFL prep course and in my one-on-one sessions. The truth is, it's not as hard as it seems. You should do a certain list of things that will help you answer this question effectively. And don't panic. In fact, this is my favorite part to explain during my consultations because I love to see people who have been struggling with their answers finally start to produce solid responses without pauses, which completely changes their scores. So first, drill the introductory sentence. That's the first sentence in your response, and you should be able to produce it like this for every question you come across. Then, give 1 reason for your opinion. You can give 2 if you're a fast speaker, but often having 1 clear reason is more than enough. Besides, this way you can elaborate on your point and provide more details. Which brings us to part 3. Drill examples. In fact, every example you give in the independent question is almost the same. You start by creating context. For example, I remember when I was a kid, I used to ... Then you add details. I'd come back from home and I'd do my homework and then ... And finally, you show some results. Why this example is relevant. For example, this allowed me to ace my exams and ... So for this question, you should simply choose one of the 2 options. State your choice at the beginning and then give 1 reason why you think so, and finish with a detailed example. By the way, if you want to know the speaking and writing templates that make up half of your answers and allow you to boost your score from 22-23 to 25-27, click on the link below. By using these templates, you'll feel confident and relaxed on test day and know exactly what to say for each type of question. And because you're watching this video, there is a special promo code you can use. Now, question 2, campus announcement.
The university is making a change in the courses it will offer. First, read the article from the university newspaper about the change. Next, listen to a conversation on the same topic. You will then be asked a question about what you have read and heard. Now listen to 2 students discussing the article.
Everything all right?
Yeah, I'm just upset about that article I showed you this morning.
Why? What's the big deal?
Well, as an art major, I think it's a big loss for the department. The university's got it all wrong.
What do you mean?
Well, The low enrollment isn't because art majors don't want to take these classes. Problem is, who has time to take them when there are so many other requirements?
I don't understand.
You see, the classes they're eliminating are all optional. The required courses are mostly painting and drawing, and they take up all our time. What we really need are different requirements, then art majors could take a better variety of classes, all the things we're interested in.
That makes sense. But the thing about the professor.
Well, that's true. But still, they're being drastic. If money's the problem, they could hire a part-time professor. Or, most of the professors in the department have secondary fields.
Really?
Yeah. At least a few painting teachers are also great sculptors. I'm sure one of them could teach a class.
The woman expresses her opinion of the university's plan. State her opinion and explain the reasons she gives for holding that opinion.
According to the announcement, the university's decision to eliminate the sculpture program is based on a lack of student interest, resulting in low enrollment, and the retirement of the only sculpture professor, which is a problem because of the department's limited budget. However, the speaker disagrees with this decision, since she believes it's a huge loss for the department. First, she says that the sculpture classes are all electives, and students are already overwhelmed with core courses like painting and drawing, so it's not like they are not interested in taking these classes. They simply don't have time. She also believes that changing the course requirements would allow art majors to take a wider range of classes. Secondly, the student says that if money is a problem, the university could hire a part-time professor or ask faculty who have secondary fields in sculpture to step in. She adds that some painting teachers are also great sculptors. This would solve the budget problem while keeping the program alive. For this question and all the other integrated speaking questions, think about your notes. In fact, there are 3 things you should be able to do to succeed in these tasks. 1. Understand the reading and listening material well. 2. Take and organize notes effectively. And 3. Make sure you present the information logically. If you can do this, you'll definitely score at least a 3.5 out of 4 on all these questions. Note that you should paraphrase the information from the reading a bit and include lots of details from the listening. The listening part is more important, so try to spend at least 30 to 40 seconds talking about it. Moving on, question 3. General to specific.
Read a passage from a psychology textbook. Then, listen to the lecture that follows. Listen to part of a talk in a psychology class.
I think this will help you get a picture of what your textbook is describing. I had a friend who taught in the physics department, Professor Jones. He retired last year. Anyway, I remember, this was a few years ago. I remember passing by a classroom early one morning just as he was leaving, and he looked terrible. His clothes were all rumpled, and he looked like he hadn't slept all night. And I asked if he was okay. I was surprised when he said that he never felt better, that he was totally happy. He had spent the entire night in the classroom working on a mathematics puzzle. He didn't stop to eat dinner. He didn't stop to sleep, or even rest. He was that involved in solving the puzzle. And it didn't even have anything to do with his teaching or research. He had just come across this puzzle accidentally, I think in a mathematics journal, and it just really interested him. So he worked furiously all night and covered the blackboards in the classroom with equations and numbers, and never realized that time was passing by.
Explain flow and how the example used by the professor illustrates the concept.
The reading is about flow, which is when you are so immersed in an activity that challenges your physical and mental abilities that you lose track of time and feel deeply satisfied with what you're doing. The professor delves deeper into the subject by giving an example of his friend, Professor Jones, who used to teach in the physics department. He says that his friend once stayed up all night working on a math puzzle that he had stumbled upon and which had no connection to his research or classes. He adds that Jones was so excited to solve it that he worked hard all night, writing numbers and equations on the blackboards in the classroom without stopping for dinner, sleep, or rest, completely forgetting the time. However, when the professor saw him the next morning, looking disheveled and terrible, his friend Jones said that he had never felt so happy. How was that? For this question, try to avoid pausing too much and using too many and so on. Does that mean you should talk like a robot? Not really. You can pause, but not too much. If you pause every 1 or 2 words, it will lower your delivery score. Also, don't repeat the same words too often. You don't want to say influence 3 to 5 times in your answer. Instead, think about how you can paraphrase or change the structure of your sentences. When practicing, it's always good to record yourself speaking or even script your answers for the first few attempts to see if you have favorite filler words or words you keep repeating. But I think the main point here is to be able to give a lot of information in a short amount of time. So you'll need complex and compound sentences. Add sentences with which, when, if, so, while, and so on. This will make your life a lot easier. Question 4. Academic lecture.
You will listen to part of a lecture. You will then be asked a question about what you heard. Listen to part of a lecture in a biology course.
Human beings aren't the only animals that use tools. It's generally recognized that other animals use tools as well, use them naturally in the wild, without any human instruction. But when can we say that an object is a tool? Well, it depends on your definition of a tool. And in fact, there are 2 competing definitions, a narrow definition and a broad one. The narrow definition says that a tool is an object that's used to perform a specific task, but not just any object. To be a tool according to the narrow definition, the object's gotta be purposefully changed or shaped by the animal or human, so that it can be used that way. It's an object that's made. Wild chimpanzees use sticks to dig insects out of their nests, but most sticks lying around won't do the job, they might be too thick, for example. So the sticks have to be sharpened so they'll fit into the hole in an ant hill or the insect nest. The chimp pulls off the leaves and chews the stick and trims it down that way until it's the right size. The chimp doesn't just find the stick. You could say it makes it in a way. But the broad definition says an object doesn't have to be modified to be considered a tool. The broad definition says a tool is any object that's used to perform a specific task. For example, an elephant will sometimes use a stick to scratch its back. It just picks up a stick from the ground and scratches its back with it. It doesn't modify the stick, it uses it just as it's found. And it's a tool under the broad definition, but under the narrow definition it's not, because, well, the elephant doesn't change it in any way.
Using points and examples from the talk, describe the 2 different definitions of tools given by the professor.
In the lecture, the professor discusses 2 competing definitions of tools that can be used both by animals and humans. The first is the narrow definition. According to it, a tool is an object that has been intentionally modified or shaped to perform a task. She gives the example of wild chimpanzees who use sticks to get insects out of their nests. To do this, however, the chimps have to modify the sticks. They remove the leaves and chew the sticks so that they have the right size to fit into the insect nests. In this way, the chimpanzees adapt the object to their needs, which fits the narrow definition of a tool. The broad definition, on the other hand, is that a tool is any object that is used for a specific task without the need for modification. An example given in the lecture is that of elephants using sticks to scratch their backs. The elephants simply pick up a stick from the ground and use it without making any changes to it. So under the broad definition, even though it's not modified in any way, it's still a tool. This is the second most difficult question on the TOEFL speaking test. The main challenge here is to understand the information well and not get overwhelmed by the number of details. I know the first time you hear a lecture like this, you think, oh my god, how am I supposed to write all this down? Well, don't try to write down too much. What you should do instead is write down words that will guide you through your answer. You should also organize your notes clearly. For example, tools, used by animals, humans, 2 definitions, 1 narrow definition, this is the first definition. Then we explain it, intentionally modified, shaped, animal, human, perform specific task, wild chimpanzees, use sticks, dig insects, nests, modify sticks, remove leaves, chew, right size. Having these notes would help you answer the question without getting lost. But the most important thing is to understand the main idea. That way, even if you don't remember all the details, you'll still be able to summarize the lecture well. This was the speaking section of the TOEFL. Congratulations! You did it! If you want to practice more, you can watch this video or click on the link below to access the templates and study materials that will help you improve your score. The Pro package also includes speaking and writing assessments, so be sure to prepare your essays for our consultation. I don't agree that money and power define success, because for me, success is more about achieving personal goals and finding happiness in life. Someone might not earn a lot of money or have a lot of influence, but they can still feel deeply fulfilled by their work. For example, I have a friend who runs a small community art studio. She doesn't make a fortune, but she loves helping others express themselves creatively, and that brings her a lot of satisfaction. Also, having good health and strong relationships is crucial. You could be the wealthiest person in the world, but if you're lonely or unhealthy, it's hard to feel truly successful. In my Zoom lessons, I see the majority of students struggle with this specific question. This usually happens because they 1. Worry too much, 2. Overthink their reasons and examples, and try to say something very sophisticated, and 3. Try to fit 2 reasons and examples into 45 seconds. As a result, they end up scoring much lower than they could. However, there are a few tips that can help you ace this question and stop being afraid of it. 1. Don't give 2 reasons if you're a slow speaker. Instead, give 1, but explain it well. You don't even realize how having 1 reason instead of 2 makes your life easier. You no longer need to come up with 2 reasons. And you also don't have to rush. This way, you can speak confidently and consistently. 2. Don't rush. If you speak too fast, you will make more hesitations and mistakes. Keep your speed natural. If I try to speak very, very fast in a limited amount of time, of course I'll panic and start saying things like and so on. Instead, imagine you're explaining your point to a friend and speak at that pace. 3. Don't focus on grammar and vocabulary on test day. When you practice at home, record your answers and then listen to them to spot grammar mistakes. Focus on fixing those mistakes until you're accurate. For vocabulary, write down 5 words you might use for each question and practice answering the question with them a few times. But on test day, focus on your ideas, not grammar or fancy words. 4. Avoid being too formal or informal. Again, imagine you're talking to a friend. Keep it fairly informal, but avoid slang. It's still an exam. If you do this, you'll see that answering this type of question will become a lot easier. Finally, tip number 5, start each answer the same way. It's important to memorize specific openings for each type of question. For agree or disagree questions, you want to start your answers one way. For the preference question, another way, and so on. This way, on the day of the test, you won't be thinking, oh my God, what can I say? How should I start? Instead, you'll have a clear structure in your mind and a few seconds to collect your thoughts as you begin with a familiar phrase. This is where templates come in handy. These are simple structures that help you organize your response and include all the important details in a short amount of time. They can boost your score from 23 to 27 in just a few days. So make sure to use templates in your preparation. I often see students with an excellent level of English who keep scoring 22, 23, or 24 simply because they either don't use templates at all or use them incorrectly. You can find high-scoring templates in our TOEFL course by clicking the link below. Now, question 2. It's a question about campus announcement. Here, you'll need to read a small announcement and then listen to a conversation between two people discussing this announcement. You'll then need to say what the announcement is about, what the active speaker's opinion is, and what 2 reasons he or she gives to support their opinion. Remember that questions 2, 3, and 4 are all integrated questions, which means they require you to understand some information first and then produce it in a limited time. This is where notes are most important. I know some students who actively use notes when they speak, while others prefer to avoid following them. But whether you use them or not while speaking, you need to have them to ensure you capture all the necessary information. As you read, write down the main idea of the text and the 2 sub-ideas. For example, the university is going to renovate the library. Why? Because it's 1, too old, and 2, overcrowded. Then, as you listen to the conversation, write down the active speaker's opinion, use A if they agree, and D if they disagree. Also, write down the most important keywords for both reasons supporting their opinion. This way, you'll know exactly what information you're looking for and what you should include in your answer. If you want to find out more about this question, feel free to watch this video later. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the upcoming speaking section practice videos. Let's begin.
Now listen to 2 students discussing the newspaper article.
You know, this makes so much sense. I wonder why it took them so long.
Oh, I don't think it makes sense.
Why not?
Well, I don't think you need to have similar interests to make friends. Look at my roommate and me. We're completely different. I mean, she's a French major and I'm studying biochemistry. She's really into sports and well, let's just say I'm not very athletic.
Yeah, but you guys are good friends.
Exactly. That's my point. We get along great.
I see. But you have to admit, there are a lot of cases where...
Yeah, I know. Cases where people decide they have to move out. But, well, nobody moves out just because they don't have the same interests as their roommate. Maybe they have very different schedules or
they have a chance to move to a better location.
Yeah. Anyway, my point is that there's no reason to expect a big drop. People are still going to want to move.
For all kinds of reasons.
I can say, the university plans to match freshman students with their dorm roommates based on similar interests, believing this will help them get along better and reduce the number of students who want to switch rooms mid-year. However, the speaker disagrees with this idea. First, she argues that students don't necessarily need to have similar interests to become good friends. She mentions that she gets along really well with her roommate, even though they don't have much in common. She's studying biochemistry while her friend is majoring in French. She's not very sporty, while her roommate is really into sports. Second, she believes that no one chooses to switch rooms simply because they have different interests. Most of the time, students decide to move because their schedules are very different or because they want a better location. Since there are various reasons why people end up switching dorms, matching them based on interests won't solve the problem. If you want to answer TOEFL speaking questions without hesitation, panic, or mistakes, click on the link below and enroll in our TOEFL course. We'll teach you how to take effective notes, speak confidently, and most importantly, provide high-scoring templates for each question to boost your score. We'll also go through TOEFL reading passages together, analyze each question type in detail, and much more. For those of you who have been struggling with the TOEFL test for a long time and want personalized feedback, you can choose our Pro package and get a consultation with me. I'll evaluate your writing and speaking and tell you what you should do differently to get a better score. Question 3 is another integrated question. Again, you'll have 30 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds to speak. This time, the reading and listening will be a bit more academic. You'll read a text explaining some concept, then listen to a lecture which will provide an example or explain the same concept in even more detail. Your job is to summarize both the reading and the listening. My tip for this question is to remember the 20-40 rule. You should spend no more than 20 seconds summarizing the reading and at least 40 seconds summarizing the lecture. This way, you'll have more than enough time to include all the necessary details.
Okay, so schools are a good example of a place where this can happen. We have schools, of course, as a place for children to be educated, and teachers are hired to actually educate the students, right? Their job is to ensure that the citizens of our society will have an education. But in order for teachers to give children a good education, there are various requirements they need to impose. Like, for instance, coming to class on time, which is important, right, for the learning process to go smoothly. It's directly related to making sure kids get a good education. But sometimes these requirements, well, they can actually work against students getting a good education. Like, say in one school, they have a policy that students must always show up to class on time. And a teacher in that school, to ensure that students show up on time, this teacher insists that if students arrive late, they aren't allowed in the classroom. And no matter what the reason, anytime a student shows up late, the teacher enforces this, won't let them in the class. Well, although the policy seems to be in the best interest of a child getting a good education, because it's meant to ensure students get the most possible learning time, well, think about it. If students do end up showing up late to class for whatever reason, they'll have to miss the entire class, which means they'll miss out on the opportunity to learn. So in effect, too much emphasis on the policy can get in the way of the child's education.
The reading passage is about goal displacement, which happens when people in an organization focus too much on rules and procedures meant to achieve a goal. As a result, the organization's ability to reach its objectives is hindered. In the lecture, the professor provides an example of how goal displacement occurs in schools. He explains that teachers are hired to educate kids, and they must follow many requirements to facilitate the learning process, such as arriving to class on time. However, sometimes these requirements adversely affect kids' education rather than help. For example, if a school policy requires students to show up on time, a teacher might insist that latecomers cannot enter the classroom. While this policy might seem beneficial, ensuring students have the full learning time, it can lead to students missing the entire class if they're late for any reason. So placing too much emphasis on this seemingly positive requirement might ultimately get in the way of their education. Finally, it's time for question 4. You'll have 20 seconds to prepare this time, and the same 60 seconds to speak. You'll listen to an academic lecture, and then you'll need to summarize it. Here's a small tip from me. Use fewer, longer sentences instead of many short ones. This will help you fit the same number of details into 60 seconds. I usually do a session with all my students on complex and compound sentences. And after they start using them, they're able to give their answers fluently without rushing too much at the end. This happens because they learn how to present a lot of details in a short amount of time. This skill is the key for this question, as well as for question 3. Let's begin.
Many animals travel in groups in order to protect themselves. This makes it difficult for a predator to capture them for food because it's hard for the predator to target one single animal and stay focused on it. But there are ways that predators can overcome this problem. Let's look at a couple of strategies some predators use. One way in which predators can hunt animals that live in groups is that they can identify an individual animal that looks different from the others. An animal may have a particular feature that makes it stand out from the others. For example, there's a small fish called a minnow. Minnows usually swim together in groups, and most minnows appear similar to each other. But sometimes there's a minnow that's a different color from the others, and what scientists have discovered is that predator fish will often chase after this differently colored minnow because it is easy to see. So the predator can more easily focus on it and catch it. Now, another way predators can hunt animals that live in groups is by physically breaking up the group in order to separate an individual animal from the rest. Sharks, for example, have been observed to swim directly into a large group of fish and thrash their tails around in order to scatter the fish. When the shark moves its tail so forcefully and so fast, It breaks up the group of fish into smaller groups that start swimming away in different directions. Then the shark can more easily locate and go after an individual fish that has become separated from its group.
The lecture is about two strategies predators use to target and capture a single animal when prey animals are traveling in groups for protection. The first strategy is to identify an animal that is different and thus stands out from the others. For example, when predators are targeting minnow fish that look very similar to each other, they will try to spot the one fish that has a different color. In this case, it becomes easier for the predator to focus on the distinct animal and catch it. The second strategy involves physically breaking up the group, so the target animal becomes separated from the rest. Sharks, for example, often swim directly into a large school of fish, trashing their tails forcefully and quickly to cause the fish to scatter. As a result, one fish becomes isolated, and the shark can easily track it down.
Number 1. In this question, you will be asked to give your opinion about a familiar topic. After you hear the question, you will have 15 seconds to prepare your response and 45 seconds to speak.
Please prepare your answer after the beep. Please begin speaking after the beep.
I believe that getting information online is a much better option because it helps you work and study more efficiently. I remember how, back in school, I used to go to the library every time I needed to look something up, and the whole process was incredibly slow. It often took me hours to complete research projects for my classes. But in college, I was already able to use the internet for research, which allowed me to manage the huge assignments I had to hand in. Besides, online content is updated regularly, so it's usually more relevant than printed books. That's why, while some people still prefer paper sources, I would definitely go for online resources instead. Now, you might be wondering if there is a specific structure you should use to answer this question. The answer is no. According to the EDS, it's not necessary to organize your response into an introduction, a middle, and a conclusion as you would with a written essay. You should just speak naturally and use common transitional words such as because, so, after that, on the other hand, I want to mention, and what this means is. That's true! Examiners want to hear a response in which a person speaks at a natural pace, with good pronunciation and intonation. They also want you to use grammar and vocabulary effectively to express your ideas, which means you shouldn't pause too long trying to decide which tense to use, nor should you use the wrong word instead of the one you need. And finally, they want you to clearly explain your opinion. However, in my one-on-one sessions, I often see students get so nervous that they pause a lot, misspeak, and forget words they know. Some of them try to include too much information in their responses, which causes them to rush and make mistakes. So, if you are a fast speaker who can easily generate ideas and are confident in your language skills, feel free to say whatever comes to mind on the day of the test. If you don't feel you belong to this group, approach the question more mechanically. How can you do it? 1. Begin all your responses the same way. Having a phrase to start every answer with can help you deal with pressure and anxiety. 2. Practice using the introductory phrase until it becomes second nature. A clear and effective introduction is key because it's the first part of your response and your best chance to make a good impression. It's hard to believe, but whenever we do this with my students, their performance on question 1 improves by about 30%. After you've successfully drilled the introductory phrase, start drilling the reasoning part. Don't give 2 reasons in your response unless you're a very fast speaker. you simply won't have time to elaborate on them. Give only one reason and make it simple and easy to understand. Most people struggle with this part because they can't think of anything quickly enough. There are two ways to solve this problem. First, create a list of reasons. Come up with 10 or 20 typical reasons that you can use for most of your responses. Second, use special phrases to introduce your reason. One of them is "because this way." For example, I prefer online courses because this way I can save time on my daily commute. I think studying alone is a better option because this way you can focus on your studies. And of course, step number 4 is to drill your example or personal story. Think about ways you can introduce your story, provide details, and conclude it. If you do this, you'll be able to answer any question fluently without preparation. And you'll never be caught off guard on test day. By the way, if you'd like to learn the speaking and writing templates that make up half of your answers and can help boost your score from 22-23 to 25-27, click the link below. These templates will help you feel confident and relaxed on test day and know exactly what to say for each question. Now, let's move on to question 2. This is an integrated question based on a campus announcement. You'll read a short announcement and then listen to a conversation between two people who are discussing it. After that, you'll need to briefly summarize the announcement and then explain the opinion of the speaker who is more active in the conversation. You'll also need to elaborate on the 2 reasons they give to support their opinion. This question, along with questions 3 and 4, is where taking notes becomes especially important. First, it helps you remember all the necessary details. And second, it keeps you focused so your mind doesn't wander. Let's give it a try.
Number 2. In this question, you will read a short passage about a campus situation and then listen to a talk on the same topic. You will then answer a question using information from both the reading passage and the talk. After the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. Now listen to 2 students discussing the article in the newspaper.
I don't like the university's plan.
Really? Why not?
Well, even though we won't have to leave the library, that's just the problem. Nobody's going to feel like walking all the way over to the cafeteria, especially when the weather's bad. They'll just run down to the basement to eat.
I don't understand. Isn't that a good thing?
No, because in the library, they're just going to serve a bunch of unhealthy snacks, sandwiches and sweets and soda, so students will just eat junk. At least the cafeteria has some healthy food.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, I probably wouldn't walk over to the cafeteria either.
And I think they're wrong about another thing. If I'm in the library and I know my friends are down in the basement chatting, I'm going to be tempted to go down there and hang out with them. You know what I mean? I'm sure I'm not the only one who'd be tempted to go down there and chat. How's anybody going to concentrate on doing actual work?
Yeah, good point. This whole thing might backfire.
Please prepare your answer after the beep. Please begin speaking after the beep.
According to the announcement, the university plans to open a cafe in the basement of the library. The goal is to prevent students from being disrupted by having to leave the building, and to give them a place to take short breaks, which could help them study more effectively. However, the speaker disagrees with this idea. First, she says it will actually cause more problems, not fewer. If students don't leave the library, especially in bad weather, they'll skip the cafeteria and eat unhealthy snacks like soda, sandwiches, and sweets from the cafe instead of healthier meals. Second, she believes the cafe will make it harder for students to concentrate. If they know their friends are chatting downstairs, they'll be tempted to join them, which could make it difficult to stay focused on their studies. In this question, there are three main things to focus on. First, paraphrase the reading. You don't need to change every single word, but try to use some synonyms or express the same ideas in a different way. If you repeat the exact same sentences from the text, this part of your answer won't be evaluated. Second, organize your notes clearly. While reading the text, write down the main idea and two supporting points. Summarize them in 1 or 2 sentences right at the beginning of your response. Then, use a short transition to move to the listening part. Don't make it too long. Just say something like, "The speaker agrees," or "The speaker disagrees with this idea." After that, go straight into the conversation summary. While listening, note down A for agree and D for disagree, plus the keywords from each reason. This will help your response flow more smoothly and prevent long pauses. And always remember, you should start talking about the conversation when there are about 40 seconds left. If you start later, you won't have enough time to include all the important details. Now, question 3. In this question, you'll have 30 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds to speak. You'll read an academic text that explains a concept, and then listen to a lecture that provides an example or explains the same concept in more detail. For example, let's say the reading passage is about social loafing. It will explain that social loafing is when people tend to put in less effort when working in a group than when working alone. Then, the lecturer might describe an experiment with 2 groups of people peeling potatoes. The first group was peeling potatoes together, while the second group was peeling them individually. And the people working alone peeled significantly more potatoes. That's it. As you can see, the lecture shows how the concept of social loafing works in a real-life example. Your job, just like in question 2, is to summarize both the reading and the lecture. Again, always remember, when there are about 40 seconds left in your response, that's when you should begin talking about the lecture. If you start later, you may not have enough time to include all the important details. Let's give it a try.
Number 3. In this question, you will read a short passage on an academic subject and then listen to a talk on the same topic. You will then answer a question using information from both the reading passage and the talk. After the question, you will have 30 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. Now listen to a lecture on this topic in a psychology class.
Okay, here's an example.
Last week, I went shopping for a pair of jeans. I hadn't bought jeans in years, and boy, was I in for a surprise. You see, all I wanted was regular jeans, but when I told this to the salesperson, he looked at me as though I were from Mars. He explained I could choose between 5 different styles, straight or baggy, and I don't know what else, and a dozen colors, and on top of that, did I want buttons or zipper? Now, it used to be there were only a couple of jeans types, and it was easy for me to decide what I wanted. Now, with all these different possibilities, shopping was hard. I went back and forth. This pair was really comfortable, but this other one was the most fashionable, and there were at least 4 different colors that looked really good. Finally, I did settle on one. But what used to take 5 minutes had turned into a 2-hour project. Before, the choice was basically dark blue or light blue, period. Maybe the fit wasn't perfect, but deciding was easy. But now I had a complex and time-consuming problem on my hands. Plus, all the back and forth actually gave me a headache. Was I making the right decision? How could I be sure? Sure, it was only a pair of jeans, but I left the store anxious rather than satisfied with my purchase.
Please prepare your answer after the beep. Please begin speaking after the beep.
The reading is about the paradox of choice, which is when people often feel overwhelmed and stressed when faced with too many options because they want to make the best possible decision. The professor delves deeper into the topic by providing an example of how he recently went shopping for a pair of jeans. While he expected a simple choice between light blue and dark blue regular jeans, the shop assistant offered him 5 different styles, like straight and baggy, various colors and options with buttons or zippers. Since there were so many choices, the professor found it difficult to decide and spent about 2 hours going back and forth between different styles and colors, trying to find the perfect pair. In the end, he left the store anxious rather than satisfied, and said that buying jeans in the past took only 5 minutes and was much more enjoyable. If you want to answer TOEFL speaking questions without hesitation, panic, or mistakes, click the link below and enroll in our TOEFL course. We'll teach you how to take effective notes, speak confidently, and most importantly, use high-scoring templates for each question to boost your score. You'll also go through TOEFL reading passages with us, analyze each question type in detail, and much more. You'll get access to the LinguaTOEFL app where you can take practice tests, track your progress, and receive a promo code for a 5% discount on your TOEFL test. For those of you who have been struggling with the TOEFL for a long time and want personalized feedback, you can choose our Pro package and schedule a consultation with me. I'll evaluate your writing and speaking responses and explain exactly what you need to change to improve your score. Finally, the last question is question 4, the academic lecture. In this task, you'll only have 20 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds to speak. You won't read any text this time. You'll just listen to a lecture. It usually begins with a professor explaining a topic or a concept, followed by 2 examples that illustrate it. For example, it might be about 2 types of animals, 2 adaptation strategies, or 2 ways something happens. Your job is to listen carefully, take notes, and then summarize the lecture. Let's try it.
Number 4. In this question, you will listen to a short lecture. You will then be asked to summarize important information from the lecture. After you hear the question, you will have 20 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. Listen to part of a talk in an environmental science class.
There's one more method of forest conservation I want to talk about before we end today, and that's forest fires. It may come as a surprise to many of you, but fire is a key element of many ecosystems. For example, it's a natural, normal process that helps maintain a healthy forest. For decades, we believed fires should be suppressed at all costs, so they were put out as quickly as possible to preserve the environment. But in the last 20 years or so, we've come to realize the advantages of regular, controlled fires to an ecosystem. In fact, a lot of plant species depend on fire for survival. In a forest full of pine trees, for example, fire is necessary for reproduction. Pine trees in particular need fire in order to spread their seeds. Pine trees, of course, have pine cones, which contain their seeds. So, what happens is that the heat from a fire melts the resin, that sticky stuff that holds the cone scales together. So, the resin melts and the cones open up, and the seeds inside the cone are released on the ground. And eventually, young pine trees grow from them. So, thanks to the fire, we've got a new generation of pine trees. Like I said earlier, fires can help grow better forests, which in turn creates a better habitat for wildlife in the areas. For instance, they have an impact on the density of the forest. A fire that kills some trees but not others can open up a forest area previously thick with trees. This lets in sunshine, which encourages growth of new shrubs and grasses. The new plant life, in turn, brings in new animal species.
Please prepare your answer after the beep. Please begin speaking after the beep.
The lecture is about 2 positive effects of forest fires on the ecosystem and how they support forest conservation. The first benefit is that fires help certain plant species reproduce, which means that they actually depend on fire for survival. The professor explains that pine trees need heat to release their seeds. The fire melts the resin, a sticky substance, on the pine cones, which allows them to open and drop their seeds onto the ground so that new pine trees can grow. The second advantage is that forest fires create better habitats for wildlife. Since the fire burns some trees and leaves others, it reduces forest density and opens up areas that were once thick with trees. This allows more sunlight to reach the ground, helping new grasses and shrubs grow. As a result, new animal species are attracted to the area. As you can see, this task gives you a lot of information very quickly. However, it's not as overwhelming as it seems. To get a high score, you need to follow a clear structure and know which information to include and which to leave out. Here are a few tips. Don't waste time at the beginning. Always begin with the lecture is about 2 and then go straight into the 2 sub-points mentioned. This lecture included a lot of information at the beginning that you simply don't need. That's because the speaker is just trying to create some context to help you understand the topic. Your job is to get straight to the point. In this case, the 2 advantages of forest fires. 2. Keep in mind that this task follows a very predictable structure. The professor will introduce each of the 2 subtopics, explain them, and then give an example. So when you take notes, focus only on the key parts of this pattern and skip all the extra details. 3. Use fewer long sentences rather than many short ones. For example, you can combine the subtopic and its definition in one sentence by saying, the first is which means that. Then add 1 or 2 sentences explaining the example. Don't worry about the fact that the lecturer says a lot more than you will. Again, they're just doing that to make sure you fully understand the topic, nothing more. And of course, write down the main keywords to help you stay fluent. If you hear a word you recognize, but are afraid you might forget, write it down. That way, you won't pause or stutter when speaking. For example, in this lecture, you could have written down words like pine trees, pine cones, resin, seeds, and so on. If you're struggling with the speaking section, click the link and get all your questions answered. If your exam is coming up soon, you can choose the Pro package and schedule a consultation with me. I'll evaluate your responses and tell you exactly what you need to change in order to score 26 or higher. That's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more tips on how to ace the TOEFL exam. Remember, it's not about learning everything, it's about learning the right things. And now, you've got a head start. See you next time. Bye.